fine. But just to start with, welcome to our Leading Remote Teams session. Welcome to our Lead, Connect and Care Festival. This is day 5 of our festival, and throughout our festival, we're actually keeping the kindness vibes going. So we kicked off the festival on World Kindness Day on Saturday, but we're trying to keep those kindness vibes going. So what we're doing at the start of every session, we're playing a short animation, and this is just one of our senior leaders sharing their thoughts on animation. We've got a full animation, and we encourage you to have a look at that when time allows. But let's get going and play our animation to go. Thanks, Jem. Over to you.
Kindness is about being friendly, being supportive, and ensuring that others feel included. It's about looking after people in the way in which we want to be looked after ourselves. And I think really importantly, it's about behaving in private the same as we behave in public. It's clear that lots of people are struggling at the moment. Life was difficult before COVID, and COVID has made our working lives and our personal lives even more challenging. I think the moral case around being kind is obvious, but beyond that, when you look after people, it's easier for them to do a good job. So the quality of care that patients receive improves. And when people are happy at work, and I think kindness can support happiness at work, it positively impacts on our personal lives. So I live in a village in South Leicestershire, and a couple of months into COVID, we set up a village WhatsApp group. And the key aim of that was trying to look after the people in our village. There's lots of retired people there, there's people who live on their own. So using the WhatsApp group, people were able to purchase food for people, to collect medication, to look after the vulnerable, to check in with people. And I sense that we communicated, and we are communicating in a way that had been absent for the last years, had some form of normality return to our personal and working lives, although it continues to be far from normal. That sense of village life and us as a collective working together has continued, and I hope it continues for much longer too.
Thank you for that. So that's just to really start the session. As I say, we want to keep those kindness vibes going. There's more on how you can get involved during our festival and the support you can provide us, but more on that at the end of the session. But it gives me great pleasure now to hand over to Jackie and to start our session on leading remote teams. Also, welcome to colleagues that have joined whilst that animation was playing. Thanks for your time. We hope you enjoyed the session. Jackie, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Bina. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining the session. My name is Jackie Mann. I'm the Organisational Development Specialist Practitioner at Leicestershire Partnership NHS Trust, and it's my pleasure to bring this session to you this morning. So I'm just about to share the screen. I believe you can see that now, and so I'm just going to talk you through a session that is actually a three and a half hour session. But I'm giving you a 90-minute taster this morning, and we do have plans to bring it into the system in February next year. So look out for that as well if you find that you get a lot out of this morning. So you can see on the screen now, we've got sort of an overarching paragraph that explains what the session is around. So it's about exploring the characteristics of remote teams to increase your confidence, to lead and build teams that are focused on performance through collective attention to results, resilience and adaptability. So we know that we've been working in really challenging times over the last 18 months or so, and we've had to adapt really, really quickly. So hopefully the session will support you in leading your teams if they are working in a remote way. So the session's going to run like this. So we're going to have 3 sections. The first section is an introduction to remote teams. So basically we're looking at the foundations of what remote working looks like for people and feels like. So we're going to explore that, and then we'll do a little bit of work around yourselves as remote leaders. So how do you need to be the same, but also how may you need to be different if you're leading a remote team? And then the final section will be around the team. So what foundations can we put into place to enable your teams to be at their very best whilst working in a blended or hybrid or remote manner, whichever terminology you are used to in your organisations. So primarily what I'd like for us to do is use the chat function to put your comments in throughout the session, and hopefully I'll be able to bring, some people into the conversation at times just to support what's been written in the chat as well. So what you're seeing on the screen at the moment is a definition of a virtual team or a remote team. So it's a group of people that are working together to serve a common purpose without being co-located, i.e. they're geographically dispersed. And I highlighted the word serve a common purpose because that's really an important thought process that needs to sit in our minds as we go through the session, because if we don't always have those foundations in place, it can be difficult to keep your teams functioning well and being happy and healthy in this different way of working that we've got at the moment. So the first thing I wanted to explore were some paradigms. So the way that we have been used to working within the NHS, where we are co-located, we sit in an office with our teams, with our colleagues, and we have a set way of doing things, or an accepted way of doing things. So paradigms are those things that run in our mind, those processes that sometimes we have to shift them slightly or dramatically when something changes. So we were never ever had this concept in our mind that the NHS would become a remote organisation, or an organisation that works in this manner. We know that in a corporate world, it is something that is often quite seen as commonplace, but for us, we were kind of dragged into it during the pandemic. So I'm just going to go through some of these assumptions or these thought patterns that we may have, and what the possible shift may need to be. And I'd be happy to see some comments in the chat box so we can draw upon your thoughts as well as I go through them. So first of all, work is a physical space that I go to. So we're running that thought pattern in our minds that I'm going to work tomorrow, or where do you work? And those thought processes ensure that we think that work is a space that I go to and attend to and do my job there. But the paradigm shift could be that work is something that I do, not a place that I go to. And I know that during the pandemic, we've had many conversations with people about the transition from work and home, both at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, and that psychological transition that normally we would have had when we were on the bus or walking or driving to work. We were either preparing ourselves mentally to go and do our jobs or decompressing at the end of the day, so that we could switch off and go into our home lives. But now it can be slightly different for people when we're working in our homes. So we have to get over that paradigm that work is a physical space that I go to, but it's actually something that I do. The next one is that work takes place between set times of the day. So in my mind, I've always worked 8 till 4 o'clock. That's historically what I've always done, and staff will have different patterns, but fundamentally they'll have a set time during the day when they work. So the new rule or assumption may be that work takes place when it is assigned and when it is due, and the focus shifts from time and moves to focuses on results instead. So towards the end of the session, we'll be looking at ways that we actually measure results and the performance of our teams and their well-being and their resilience and all of those things. So what am I measuring? Is my focus on the results or the times of day that my staff are checking in and checking out of the work that they're doing? The old assumption may have been employees have to be continually guided, and I think that the new assumption should be that employees are responsible and accountable for not only their individual results, but a collective result for the whole team as well. So we're all in it together, and it's a new way of perhaps thinking about remote working. Relationships are limited to those I meet in person. So again, I've had so many conversations, and the same thing ruminates through my own mind often, that when I see people on calls that I think, oh my goodness, I've not seen you for so long. I would have bumped into you when I was going to that meeting or visiting that building. And now I only see certain people, the ones that I meet remotely, over MS Teams usually. And again, there's a lot of verbatim about the fact that the relationships are diminishing within remote working. And a new rule or assumption that we could possibly start to think about is that effective and deep relationships can be developed despite geographical barriers. It's just that we have to work a little bit harder and be a little bit more deliberate in the way that we build our relationships. So over to you guys, if you'd like to pop your thoughts, or if you've got any other things that are coming into your mind as I went through that list. That's just a snippet of paradigms that we may be running, but you'll no doubt have some more. So be happy to see what goes into the chat. No one has anything to add to that. So I'm assuming that that's getting you thinking. Catherine, thank you. Our working relationships with teams outside of our own have definitely benefited from remote working with the help of MS Teams, yes, and that's where geography, what was a geographical challenge previously, has actually helped. So it's a very good point, thank you. Broderick, I definitely agree with the last one. I feel that I've made better contacts with people that are different sites I wouldn't normally get to meet. Yes, it's just a real shift into reframing what the stories that we tell ourselves or have told ourselves through the pandemic. So very, very good point. And Rebecca, totally agree with relationships. I've joined in during the virtual world, but I've still made some great connections across the system in 6 months. And I know, thank you, Rebecca. And Rebecca and I have met and connected during the pandemic as well, and it's perhaps a relationship that wouldn't have perhaps developed in previous way that we worked. Yeah, and Charlotte, yes, definitely. Getting the boundaries between work and home life can be a real challenge. And, and hopefully we'll get some tips from others about how they've done that or how they do that, and what strategies they've put into place during the last, well, I keep saying 18 months, but we're actually heading up to 2 years, scarily enough now. Vicky's saying she's been able to create more relationships, a bit more difficult working in a hybrid way, yes. And Tara, I think there is a shift to the set times of working as well. So yeah, great comments, people. So thank you very much for that. Okay, so there are barriers, there are challenges to working in this way, and we weren't planning for it. So let's have a look at some of the barriers that people may be thinking about, or thinking, what am I going to do about this barrier or this challenge? So these are some of the ones that I've thought of, but you will have others. So I'm happy again as we go along that you pop them into the chat again, and I'll try and pick out a few and perhaps bring someone, some of you into the conversation. So we've almost mitigated this one, that lack of physical interaction, the loss of face-to-face synergies can cause feelings of isolation and stress. There comes a point, so I take myself as an example. I'm in my home on my own virtually, because the rest of the household leave leave my home in the morning, don't come back until 5 o'clock. So literally, in a physical sense, I'm alone in my home, and that can at times bring in that isolation and stress. Communication is predominantly via technology. Can be a challenge to some people. Some people are not comfortable with technology, and some people are not even comfortable with picking up the phone to people, and so that presents a challenge. Trusting relationships are harder to build and maintain. So with that one, I'm more thinking about your team dynamics and your team relationships, and the importance of keeping an eye on those dynamics when you're not co-located or sitting across the table from your work colleagues. Accountability and responsibility of individuals is harder to measure. By harder, I mean, what I actually mean is it needs to be done more deliberately, that's all, than you would have done if you were co-located. Team dynamics and cohesive working is a potential challenge, again, because you have to work harder to maintain those good team dynamics. Building and maintaining the sense of connection. I'll be looking forward to later to see what strategies and ideas that you guys have put into place to enable your teams to maintain that sense of connection. And this one's a big one as well for me, is innovation and service improvement. And even if you work in a small team, and those conversations that you might have walking down the corridor that, oh, I've got this great idea that I think would make our team work much better, or I've got this idea and I want to take it forward, is sometimes if you work in a remote manner, those ideas can get stifled. But it's really important for us as an NHS and an integrated care system, or even within our own organisations, that our attention to service innovation and improvement is always at the forefront of our minds. That attention that I spoke about on the last slide, about individual and a team attention to collective results, again, may become a potential barrier for people. Maintaining and building a shared purpose, identity, vision and objective. So each team should have those, or service. And often when one of those things is not in that equation, then we're on a back foot. So have we got those things in the first place, and what do we need to do those things if they are missing. Is hopefully I'll give you some ideas, but also you will share some ideas throughout the next hour or so. So maintaining people's skill sets, knowledge and growth, again, is also very important, but possibly harder to do in a remote setting for both individuals within the team, but also the growth of the team as a whole, or the service as a whole. Or even the organisation, if you want to take it that on that sort of scale. So what other challenges are you experiencing? I'm happy to do a hands up on this one. So if anybody wants to chip in on some of the challenges that you face or faced during this move to a remote world. Or into the chat. Rebecca, thank you. Do you want to pop your camera on for a minute?
Thanks, Jackie. Not so much now, but in my previous organisation, I think there was this sense of, and I think somebody's put it in the chat, like this lack of trust that people are, I don't know, sat there watching Netflix and, you know, not doing what they need to do. I think some people found it really difficult. Not that they used to like walk the floor that much, but the fact that they couldn't just pop in, and that sense of they're not answering their phone straight away and things like that. So I think there has been a shift in that, but I think there's still people that find it really quite tricky to trust that people are doing what's required. I suppose it goes back to what you said about having that, you know, the objectives and what needs to be done by when. So they were just a few thoughts.
And there is a little exercise later on trust, and we know that we will trust some people more than others. And there's also that paradigm shift as well around the fact that just because someone's presenteeism doesn't always equate to results, does it? We know that from, you know, when we've worked in our offices and in our buildings. So yeah, and it's a mindset shift. And yeah, so thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, very good points, and I'm glad we're going to touch on that a bit later as well. Anybody else? Yeah, good point, Liz. Yeah, sometimes you do miss something, don't you, when you do things over Teams. Jo?
For me, I think what I found the hardest is that I'm very much a people's person. So to be sat behind a screen talking to people, I found it quite difficult. I'm getting used to it now. And what I'm finding now is that actually when I do go out and talk to people, not very often, I find it quite scary. But I am definitely chomping at the bit to get back out there and talk to staff and get out and engaging and stuff. But yeah, that's been my hardest challenge. Yeah. Talking to people over through a screen.
Yeah. So. That is that physical interaction, isn't it? It's that sense that as a human beings we want to connect, that there's something about, you know, without going diverting off the topic, there's something about the closeness of physical proximity of people that we feed off that invisible energy sometimes, and that is missing. And I think, you know, for me in my role as organisational development is it's particularly evident when perhaps I'm coaching somebody who's and the topic area may be a little bit emotional, but also when I'm working with teams, I don't always grasp the emotion in the room. That is a physical emotion. So reading people's physiology is a little bit difficult, isn't it? So it's a challenge for all of us, Jo. Thank you.
That's okay.
Thank you. Okay, so let's just move on then. So I'd like you just again just take a minute or two. There's no, I don't want to rush people into this, and I often say to people is just take a moment jot something down on a piece of paper, is because this will be your takeaways from this shortened version of this session. So, and then perhaps into the chat is just tell us what's working well for you and your team as you're working remotely, and even more so is what is the even better if. So just, I'm going to give you a minute just to sit and jot that down onto a piece of paper, so you can take it away and think about it, but then also perhaps either pop your hand up if you wish to share, or into the chat as well. Yeah, so again, Rebecca, thank you. As again, you don't feel so as productive when you haven't connected with someone. You need that energy from other people. Thank you. Quick catch-up conversation on Teams are working well. Perhaps we should schedule them in. Yeah, we've adapted in our team over the, what was working at the beginning fizzled out. So we did have a WhatsApp group and we were connecting through that on a daily basis, doing some banter. But then as we got used to MS Teams, we started to try and sort of communicate via the chat on Teams as well. But then we had a once a week huddle, which now we've changed to twice a week, because on a Monday we do what work are we doing this week, and where are our challenges, and where do we need support. But then midweek, then we do a health and well-being check-in, where we just don't talk about work at all. So what else is working for you guys? Tara, let's go back to Tara. People are very productive when they have space and time to think. The work-life balance is great for morale and allowing people time for themselves without the work to commute, and people are connected well and can attend additional meetings without travel. Yeah, and we found, and in our team, in our leadership offer, is that in LPT is that we actually get more people attending our sessions, because when as an organisation, I'm sure yours are too, is we're quite, our buildings are geographically dispersed across the county, and it was sometimes difficult for people to get to our training base at Beaumont Leys. So definitely, yeah. And Broderick's saying it's brought my team closer, because for a long time we were all each other had and work alone at home, so we were all going through it together, and there's a real buzz in the chat channel. Yeah, mainly talking about food, and it really helps us grow closer. There's an intensity to working from home, and those ad hoc, I'm going to go and have a chat with so-and-so across the other side of the room, or someone comes into our office from another building, and you stop and you chat, and so there's this intensity when I'm constantly working without those nice interruptions. So productivity may have increased, but there's a danger then the isolation and that connection can diminish, because all my health and well-being may diminish, because those breaks are not naturally occurring throughout the day. So Vicky, we were able to change the frequency of meeting as and when needed, because we were able to use more creative ways. Everyone joins in and everyone's responsible. That's lovely. Thanks, Vicky. And Liz is saying, great if you have an admin day to work from home but can still connect with other teams. Thank you. Did anybody want to say anything using not the chat? No. Okay, let's move on then. Let's move on. So hopefully that sort of got you thinking about teams in general. So what do we need to think about as remote leaders is where we're going next. And the way that we're going to explore this section is to think about personal context, setup and well-being. So we've already touched on it about, you know, what affects our well-being for ourselves, but also the people that we work alongside, and what do we need to do as remote leaders, or what do we do to ensure the well-being of our teams? There's that thing about technology, the connection and the communication. So we're going to have a look at that, and what technology, how are we connecting and communicating, and those tools and the technology that, you know, have come sort of leaps and bounds, especially with MS Teams. And, you know, we know we've got Alicia Humphreys from LPT on the call this morning, and Alicia is, you know, looking at, sorry Alicia, I hope you don't mind me mentioning you, but looking at MS Teams and how we can exploit that in the organisation more, and how can we use the technology to help us going forward. And perhaps Alicia, when we get to that section, you might want to pop in and say something. Style and flexibility as a leader. What do we need to change? What parts of our leadership style and our personalities do we need to adapt to make sure that we are doing the very best for the people that are working for us? So what do I need to, how do I need to be different, but how do I need to be the same as well? So we'll have a look at that as well. So again, real interactive part this is, so I'm happy to take hands up. So personal context, setup and well-being. So this is about personally your well-being and how you set your teams up for success and ensure their well-being. So the question to you all is, what do you do to ensure your own mental and physical well-being and that of your team? So I'm happy to take some hands up on this one. So for me personally, I do like, I make a point, you know, thankfully she's really quiet, but I've got a dog, and I make sure at lunchtime I do take her out for at least 10 minutes. But it's for me to like change my visual sight sort of proximity when I'm looking at the screen all day, that I need to go out and widen my visual horizons almost and take in the sights and sounds of the outdoors. Catherine, thank you. Do you want to pop your camera on as well for a second?
Hiya.
Hello.
Moved to a more comfortable place. The connection wasn't very good. I think for me, I try, I don't do it all the time, but I try to get out each morning. So the time that normally when COVID first came about, I'd leave home for 7 o'clock because it'd take me a good hour to get into work because it's 23 miles away. And so we didn't know how long it would be. So I wanted to stay in that routine. So now each morning, instead of travelling to work, I get to go and walk around the park. So every morning I walk around the park. The sun's just coming up, so it's quite a nice time to arrive at the park. And I just think it kind of sets me up for the day. It's really helpful, but it's very easy to fall out of.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. Clap, 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 because it's amazing. Because, you know, on a personal level, I've even struggled with this. I used to leave work at quarter past 7, but sometimes I'm still in my bedroom getting ready at 7:15 now, and we're creatures of habit, aren't we? And forming new habits is something that we have to work on continually. And those bad habits creep in where I don't set my alarm anymore and things like that. And those small things can sometimes add up to not supporting our physical and mental well-being. So thank you very much, Catherine. Yeah, let's have a look what people are putting in the chat. Alicia has to go. Yeah, no worries, Alicia. Thank you. Thanks for letting me know. I mean, interaction and outdoor time and sets myself up before work. Paddle? Charlotte, do you want to elaborate? Hello, Charlotte.
Yeah, it makes a big difference for me. I was doing it anyway before COVID, but it became crucial in COVID because that was my only contact with anyone, and it was outdoors, and it was physical, and it was sunrise, and you know, it's that kind of reset, ready for the day. I think it's been a lifesaver, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks, Charlotte. Luke saying he encourages his staff to have breaks throughout the day away from their screen and try not to book meetings back to back throughout the day as well. And that, I know that's been a huge challenge for everybody. And I know within Leicestershire Partnership NHS Trust, particularly, we've tried to encourage the fact that meetings don't have, it is another paradigm shift almost, that meetings do not have to start and end on the hour, that we can start at 5 past and finish at 5 to, just to enable to build in those breaks. So, you know, it's something that we're just getting you. I love it, Rebecca. You're trying to do 10 squats every morning. It's fabulous. And I read an article just recently about what people have purchased during the pandemic that now is gathering dust, or that they're using these things and they were the best buys for them. And I know that personally I splashed out on a wobble board. It's one of those things that you have at the gym that shake all your muscles. I actually thought it was a lazy way to do some exercise, and it just sits behind me now. So I know periodically that I can go onto my wobble board and do a few squats as well during the day, and just wakes up all of my cells in my body while it sort of like vibrates and shakes everything. So that's really great. Broderick, setting up proper office space at home has been good for me. Yeah, definitely. Leave the room at the end of the day. And again, yeah, perfect, Broderick. Same, I've tried to, you know, it doesn't matter which room, and through the past 18 months, I've moved from various different rooms to try and get my setup as I would like it. And I think whatever space you've got in your homes, whether you're in a corner of a bedroom or you're lucky enough to have an office space, is make it as nice as possible for yourself. But also another habit that I know I've heard other people say is that at the end of the day, so if you are unfortunately on your tables in your kitchens or your dining rooms, is pack it all away at night. It might seem like a bit of a chore, but pack it away so you don't see it as you're walking through that space during your non-working time. Yeah, Rebecca read that article too. Yeah, I've always so there's a lot of you know, those bicycles, the Pelotrons that are sitting gathering dust in people's kitchens because they've never used them since they bought them. So I hope that's giving you some food for thought as well, about some ideas about what you might want to put in place for yourself, but also for your team members, or get them talking and encouraging each other to build new habits, healthy ones. So let's move on to, oh no, we've got some tips. Appreciate, so we've touched on some of these things. So appreciate individual home environments. So everyone's different. Like I said, some people might be on their tables in their kitchens, or lucky enough to have a dedicated space, or using the back bedroom, but appreciate what that might be like for your different team members. Check that your staff have optimal work setup. So again, support them with their DSE, and ensure that they are not building in bad habits in terms of their setup as well, and that you're providing them with the resources to be able to set up that supports their well-being. Allow flexibility wherever possible. So we touched on that as a paradigm shift, is allowing flexibility. So it's okay during the winter months, if I normally have a half an hour break in the summer, that I take an hour. So I prolong my working day by half an hour, but it actually gives me a bit longer time to go out and enjoy the light while we have it, instead of being out in the darkness. Establish those work and home boundaries and encourage your team to do the same, which we've already talked about. Be clear about expectations about staying connected as a team. So it's that isolation, it's encourage those ad hoc conversations, and put some ground rules into place about what's acceptable and what isn't, for yourselves and for your teams. Ensure you stay alert and up to date on any changes that are occurring amongst your team members. You know, if you've got someone who's normally really chatty and suddenly they've gone quiet, just connect with them. And just a few weeks ago it happened to me. I just got this sense that one of my team members wasn't as chatty as normal via emails or MS Teams chat. So, you know, by the Wednesday morning, I was checking in with her to see if she was okay, and she said she was struggling a little bit with her workload, and so we were able to just put in some different solutions for her. And it's keeping that sense of what's happening with your team members and noticing those changes. And make your staff's well-being a priority. You know, sometimes this is, you know, if we were co-located and always in an office together, this is something that you would be seeing and doing sort of ad hoc, but now it has to be done a little bit more deliberately. Okay, so connection and communication. This is about maintaining conscious effort on how to best connect and communicate with our teams. So we've already talked about huddles and coffees and other things in the chat as well as while we were doing the first section. But what have you previously done or hope to do more of so that you ensure your team feel connected? Now, you know, I don't know about your organisations, but within LPT, we've got a certain teams that we know when we went into the pandemic that the home working was going to be a temporary measure, but that's not how it's now playing out. And as it becomes a more permanent way of working going forward, is what are you doing to ensure that your team stay connected with that sense of it's not going to be any different for us going forward. So what sort of things? Rebecca's saying regular one-to-ones, meet face-to-face and maintaining those social aspects as well. Yeah, and I heard from a team the other day who said once a month they meet up in their local park, they grab a coffee or a hot chocolate and they do a walk-in meeting. And it again, it's a paradigm shift about what are the benefits of that, you know, that human connection, that being close to my work colleagues, that builds that sense of togetherness. And it might seem like you're taking time out of your working day to travel to a park to meet up with colleagues, but actually this is something that would have been quite acceptable when we were working pre-pandemic days when we would drive 20 minutes to another building or half an hour to another building to go and actually have a meeting with somebody. Love a walk-in meeting. What else have we got? Does anybody want to share what other things have you done, or do you want to do more of now that this may become a more permanent way of working for us in the NHS? Happy to take hands up as well. Broderick, our last hour of the week was a Zoom Teams call of chit chat, talking about weekend plans. That's lovely, thank you. We've had team quizzes. Do you know what? I've heard that before, Vincent, from people, and of a Christmas meal planned in person. And we have too, because we haven't done it. We didn't obviously do it last Christmas, so I think that's really nice, and it's actually something to look forward to. It's almost like when you've booked a holiday, that feeling of, and it comes closer to you going on holiday, it's that sense of excitement that builds and that looking forward to something. It's really good for our well-being as well as connecting. Vicky, you do origami as a team, Vicky? You want to pop on and tell us about your origami?
Hello. Yes, I can't get my camera's going to work.
That's
yes,
okay.
No. Yes, it's on. It's on. So we try and I've always had a well-being session in my team's meetings, whether it's been in a real world or not, and we've always tried to be very creative, and we've done some very strange and interesting things because it's everybody's individual well-being. Yeah. So everybody bought what they felt was good, and one of the things we did was we had some money that we were given to be able to get some equipment, and I bought a little web camera, and I did things. We did the there's a Japanese crane that's meant to be good for good luck, and you have to make so many or something. There's a custom around it. So I actually did a session on making these paper cranes, and then I had another go. I can't remember. I think I might have made Christmas trees. So we've done a couple of things just to try and do something a little different.
It's perfect. It's great. And actually, thank you, because I've jotted that down. I think it's amazing. So it could be origami. And I know during this festival earlier in the week, there was painting with coffee. I didn't manage to get to it myself, but one of my colleagues did. And she says she's looking forward to showing us as a team how to use coffee to do a painting, and she really enjoyed the session. So it is, isn't it? It's about finding different ways to build that connection amongst us all, and so doing some unusual things there, and the quizzes, origami, painting. There'll be people in your team who have got skills that you perhaps didn't know that they had from outside of work, and perhaps someone knits or crochets, and you can show people how to do certain different skills and things. Yeah, Catherine's saying she loves these ideas. So any more ideas, please do pop them into the chat. I think they're amazing, and it really it's just feeding my mind as well as things that we can do differently going forward. Painting works really well. Yeah, we're definitely going to have a go at painting with coffee, Rebecca. So some tips here. Excuse me. Keep in touch more often. Language is vital. Caring and inclusive, and and that's so for us as leaders in our organisations or our teams is the use of the language that we choose, and it's we and it's us and it's a collective, really sort of sets the tone for the climate and in your teams as well. Ask more questions and listen without judgment or without that urge to respond, which is always our natural inclination. Refresh or establish and agree team ground rules. How do we want to work together? What ideas have we got? And we'll touch on this part of this in the later part of the session as well. Emails. Ooh, a biggie. I'm surprised that's not been mentioned. Emails, are they essential? Who really needs to receive or be copied into them? So I know, and I'm sure it's the same for you guys as well, that the number of emails that I receive has incrementally increased during the pandemic and during the changeover to remote working, because thanks, Joe. Thank you very much. Perhaps catch you later in the week. The tendency to throw out an email has become the easier thing to do. Get something off your to-do list. It puts the onus onto somebody else. And to be on the receiving end of so many emails, I think it's just something we need to pay attention to and actually stop and think. Does it deserve an email? Can I just write it in a chat function of MS Teams or any other method that you may be using, like a WhatsApp, or can I just pick up the phone and have a conversation with someone rather than fire that email off? Because the less we can become reliant on emails, I think, for our health and well-being, it's much more beneficial to try and do a mix of things. Work at building trust with self and team, and between team members as well. So we've got an exercise coming up shortly to just explore trust a little bit in a little bit more detail. Make the technology work for you and your team. So test things out, test it out. If it doesn't work, stop doing it and try something different. It's a period for experimenting on what works well and what doesn't work well for the team, and and that gaining that consensus, I think, is really important. So like I say, we'll touch on that as well going forward. Okay, so the next one then is tools and the technology as well. So making use of technology is fundamental to the success of remote teams and as leaders. So this is about skills and of yourselves, but also your team members. Are you competent and confident with technology and collectively making use of what works for your team? Thanks, Vince. Thanks for letting me know. Yeah, so how good are we at the technology? Do we shy away from it? Do we embrace it? Have we embraced it, or are we still struggling to embrace it? If not for yourself as leader, but what about your team members as well? How are you already or intend to use the available technology to ensure your team stay connected? So what's going on for you guys? What's going on in terms of technology? Has it been a challenge for some of you? And how have you overcome those challenges with technology? I think Alicia, I think she had to leave the call, so I'm not sure if she's back or not. But what are your thoughts around technology? Rebecca.
Thanks, Jackie. I know this is a really simplistic way of looking at things, but I just generally, I think, well, nobody tells you how to do your online shopping at Tesco. You kind of figure it out. So as new technology is presented, I'm trying to keep that mindset that I can probably figure the basics out, but I think it would be helpful, and within our organisation we are getting some training around kind of I think it's only going to be like the basics, but there's probably things within Teams, within Office 365 that we just don't know about because we haven't explored it. So
I don't know it's there, but it's a bit scary to dabble in it, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think try and embrace it. You know, we've used Menti, we've looked at Slido and things like that, which we weren't using before. I find my 9-year-old is actually more tech savvy than me. So if there's anything that's quite challenging, she just works it out within, you know, a couple of moments. So I think generally there is people around us that can support us. Yeah,
good to reach out for support, and I think, you know, perhaps that's something that will evolve as well in within the system and in our individual organisations as you know. We've got Alicia in our trust who is looking at MS Teams in particular and the apps within MS Teams and how we can use them to the fullest. So thanks, Rebecca. Thank you. So Charlotte, sometimes feel bombarded with different formats, Teams, emails, WhatsApp, feel the need to monitor. I have a good point, Charlotte, because again, it's that it still comes back to you know, us as fundamentally as human beings, and almost a tag on to that, Charlotte, that you've said is we're trying to multitask far more perhaps than we did when we were working in our offices. So as an example for me, when I was training all day long, I wasn't doing anything else. When the people who were coming to our courses were at the course, they weren't doing anything else. So how many of us, I don't want you to pop this in the chat or anything like that, but how many of us are at meetings but also have our emails open on a different screen, or are actually doing other work as well as trying to attend a meeting? So in actual fact, what we're trying to do is multitask. And as much as we think it's a good thing, it's actually not very good. And we're not actually built to multitask as human beings. We are far more productive when we are doing one thing at a time and focusing on that one thing at a time. And it's mindfulness, it's being present in the present moment and not shifting our mindset in 100 different directions all the time. Broderick saying we're all quite savvy in the team, but the challenges come when virtual networks don't work or when systems are down. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I must, you know, a big shout out to all of the IT support services. They did an amazing job through the pandemic, and you know, and have supported and adapted, you know, to giving everyone VPN and, you know, small things like that that have enabled us to connect in the way that we have done. So, but a good point. Okay, so some tips here. Use Teams or equivalent as effectively as possible. Everyone present on calls, clear desk, phone off, video on, sound on, chat encouraged, and what else? So these are like, yeah, a bit like I've just said, it's that thing that I'm in the present moment and I move everything away and out of sight so I can focus on what's important and what's happening right now. Use the phone for a change. If it allows for a walk and talk meeting, it makes a welcome change from a video call. Use of text, internal messaging, WhatsApp groups for frequent contact and other interactive and social tools as well. And maintain some fun, virtual lunches, and we've said some of these things as well through the chat as well. Yeah, Catherine's saying we've had a couple of people that hadn't even used a laptop and were quite fearful with the change, and however with support they've been able to totally embrace it. Yeah, that's brilliant. Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, it's you know, for some of us who perhaps work in, you know, more sort of administrative or non-clinical roles where we you know, some people are not, you know, that tech savvy. You know, I'm talking about nursing staff maybe, and you know, in our organisation, you know, district nurses or health visitors where their primary focus is not on the technology, even though they may use electronic patient records, is how do you encourage those things to be embraced as well. Okay, so the last one in around remote leadership is about your leadership skills, thinking about your style and how you flex it to suit different people in different circumstances. So in the fuller 3.5 hour session that will be available system-wide from around about February, we're expecting, we explore this in a little bit more detail, because there'll be parts of your leadership style, and we think about personality, we think about you know, the sort of the leadership models out there, that am I a laissez-faire, autocratic, or a democratic leader? What style do I predominantly use, and is it suiting me now? Is it suiting individuals? Do they need, have you got individuals who are raring to go and happy that you can take a more hands-off approach with them? But are there team members who require a more democratic leadership style where they feel that sense of connection? So what have you done, or what do you do, or have you done to adapt your leadership skills with more of this remote working? So again, hands up or into the chat, and I'll see if I can pick out some key points. So I think while you guys are having a think about that or writing in the chat, I think from my point of view as a leader, I'm quite an introverted, you know, if I was looking at my Myers-Briggs personality type, I'm an introversion. So for me, it feels quite comfortable to sit at home alone, but to connect via an email rather than picking up the phone. But I also know that, you know, I've got team members who need that connection more. So I purposely will, you know, work on ways to adapt that. And I know the ones that will fly and need less guidance or less support than others. So I've had to pay probably more attention to that during the pandemic or remote working than perhaps I did when we all sat in the same office as well. So what other things have you had to flex in terms of your style? Thanks, Sammy. I hope you've got something out of the session. To see you soon. Thank you for coming. Anybody put any thought into their leadership style? Perhaps it's not something you've deliberately thought about before. So it'd even be interesting to hear your thoughts on that. Vicky, thank you.
Oh.
Hello, Vicky.
Hi. Just to say, I think on leadership, I started doing an ILM, which unfortunately COVID interfered with, and I've kind of lost my motivation to complete at the moment, but which made you think about your leadership style, and of course leadership versus management and all that is what you think about. And it was quite interesting. So one of my team, obviously I don't work for Leicestershire Partnership, LCC, but one of my team turned around and said, we had a challenging discussion, I will say, regarding that they weren't, whenever I asked them to do something or suggested something, they questioned it. And I was like, but you said to me, when I asked about how would it be best for me to work with you, you said you wanted me to be more directive. And he said, and he turned around and he says, yes, but you wouldn't make a sergeant major, would you? And I was like, I personally wouldn't respond to someone who treats me, leads me as like a sergeant major. So why would I do that style? And it was really interesting. So it is a bit of a problem, but I do think you've got to change with each person.
Yeah,
I also think you can be at odds with yourself because it might not suit who you are.
Yes, exactly.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and it is about understanding personalities and your own personality and those of your your team members, and it's a group, almost like appreciation for those personality differences that we need to perhaps draw out amongst our team members. Yeah, and Rebecca very importantly has put, it's important to remain authentic to yourself. So when you try to be something that you're not, it's that word congruent always comes into my mind. Is this congruent? Is this behavior congruent to who I am? Do my values and my behaviors, are they linked together that make me feel comfortable? And yeah, so being authentic is absolutely spot on. Thank you, Rebecca. Okay, so let's just move on a little bit then. We start to now go through the tips. I always forget this bit. Focus on your leadership style, and are you using the best style for the work, the situation, and the person? And that does kind of link in, Vicky, with what you said about when are you a leader and when are you a manager, and do you know what the distinct differences are with that? Work on attending, understanding, empathizing, and helping others. Practice empowerment and building trust. So empower your employees or your team members, is crucial to keep their motivation and their confidence levels. Or avoid unnecessary micromanagement as well. So it's that thing about just because I can't see people is try to avoid the temptation of continually checking in with people. Give others your full attention and watch out for signs of anything changing, and we've touched on that one before. And consider how you praise, encourage, and give, and also receive feedback from your team members. So yeah, it's quite a big one, this one. Some people like to be praised and thanked. Some people find it unnecessary. So again, it's about knowing the individuals in your team and what's other people's preference. So do people want to be thanked for their contribution, or do they want to be thanked for a job well done? It kind of like, for those of you on the call who may know Myers-Briggs, it's about whether your team members or your colleagues are predominantly have a thinking preference or a feeling preference, will come through in what they like to be praised and thanked for. And how do people receive and give feedback is another one to sort of be mindful of as well. Okay, so we've got 20 minutes left, and so we're going to just sort of whiz through the fundamentals of resilient teams. So these are the fundamentals that I think we need to sort of like perhaps consider. Everyone knows what's expected, that the team maintain clarity and focus on the important things and let go of what are not the important things is crucial for cohesive team working. The people know each other, they appreciate and understand each other's personalities, but also people's workloads, people's external circumstances, if appropriate, and things like that as well. They know how to work together. So you've got an agreed set of processes and behaviours that everyone buys into, and everyone knows what those are, and that we know how we are being and doing is something that we regularly touch base with. That might be emotions and well-being, but also might be task related, and that giving and receiving of feedback is in there as well. How are we doing? What am I measuring? What are the other team members measuring for our collective results as well? So what do people need to have in place for this to happen? For that clarity and focus on the right things. And in the wider, the longer version of this session is we spend some time exploring circles of influence and circles of control. So for those of you, I expect, many of you know this model, but fundamentally what it thinks about is what takes up my energy as an individually or as a team, but I can influence, I can change, and I have some control over it. But alternatively, where am I perhaps putting my energies where it's not productive, and I can't change that. So these are conversations that are really quite fundamental to cohesive team working. Is what are we focusing on? And if we're focusing on the wrong things, what can we do to shift our focus onto more productive things? So again, just think about that for a moment, and perhaps think about it after the session. So thinking about your own teams and the focus of attention, does your team need to shift their mindsets in any part of their working? If we were in a room together, this exercise is great when you put those circles onto a flip chart paper and you give everyone a pile of post-it notes and say, what do we think we have control over, and what's in our circle of concern that perhaps we don't have any control over, and we would get those out onto a flip chart and talk them through as a team. And again, there's no reason why you can't do it virtually as well. So what are our thoughts on this one? Oh, hello, Fiona. We're just pausing to give people some time to think about things our team focus on. Does anybody want to add anything or put their hands up and tell me about, is there any mindset shifts that are required amongst your team members, that their focus isn't always on the right things? Broderick in the chat is saying we did a great piece of work about team journey and where we wanted to be during the first 6 months of the pandemic. We're now trying to focus on value-added tasks as our team is quite small, and it seems to help with the focus and getting good results. That's great, Broderick. Thank you very much for that. Okay, I'm going to move that one on because that one seems a little bit of a challenging one. Is perhaps something to give some thought to is for you and your teams as well. So let's just, so Rebecca's saying, I'm lucky to have a great team. I think we're clear on our focus. We don't have capacity to focus on other things. Yeah, great. Thanks, Rebecca. Okay, so how can we build better relationships so that we know each other well and we appreciate and understand each other? So that's focused attention on building relationships and maintaining those relationships. And I think the important word on this one is trust and trustworthiness. So the way that you can start to think about this is, you know, I've just got a quote there that trust is not some soft, elusive quality. It's a pragmatic and tangible asset that you can create within your own relationships and dynamics between team members. So the way that you can think about this and for yourselves, but also with your teams, is if you took a moment to think about a person with who you've got a trusting relationship with. What's it like? How does it feel when I'm with that person or working with that person? How well do we communicate together? How quickly do we get our tasks done? And how much do you enjoy that relationship and that time spent with that person? So, you know, the things that come to mind when I think about those people is that the relationship is nurturing on both sides. Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you for coming. It's a nurturing relationship on both sides. We can quite easily bounce ideas off each other, but we can equally challenge one another. If you feel safe in the relationship, thanks, Fiona. The communication flows really nicely. And it's a productive relationship as well. We know what we're doing and we can get on and we trust one another to do that. Fiona, did you pop your hand up for a second? Did you want to come in? No? Okay, thank you. So that's how I feel, and how, you know, that safe feeling, that nurturing feeling, that supportive feeling, and I get things done. But what I want you to do for just a minute then is some personal reflection, you know, and jot this down on a piece of paper. And then I'd like to see your feedback in the chat, but also if someone wants to put their hands up and come into the call, it'd be really nice to hear from someone. What about a person that you have a low trust relationship with? What is that relationship like? What does it feel like? What is it like when we communicate with one another, and how effectively do we get things done when we haven't got that within that relationship? So, and that enjoyment, where is it in that relationship? So I'm going to give you 1 minute just to jot some things down, either in the chat, or then I will invite people to pop their hands up. Rebecca says it makes you feel nervous when you have to work with people you have low trust with, and it feels uncomfortable, and you're on guard, you're guarded. You don't have that freedom within that relationship. Yeah, it's not comfortable, is it? Okay, does anyone want to pop their hands up and just talk this one through from a personal perspective? Be brave, people, come on. Vicky, oh, okay, thanks, Vicky. Thanks for coming along. It'd be nice to see some more comments in the chat around this one. We all know that we have those relationships. Okay, I'm just conscious of the time, so I'll move us along now. So I think, you know, is put some thought into that for yourselves and the people that you work with or work alongside, and also for your team members in the way that they interact with one another. We don't always have those good relationships, as hard as we may try to have them. That sometimes the reality is that they don't always exist. And I hope, you know, you take some time and reflect on those. And also then, if you have got those low trusting relationships, is what are you going to do about it? What can you do about it? Is, you know, think of you know, one thing that you could do to move that relationship along a little bit so that it falls into that high trust relationship, and that energy and that comfort that you get from that relationship is something that you work harder on to build with those low trusting relationships as well. So the third quadrant then was about how we work together, how we agree those processes and also those behaviours. And this one's always a biggie. And the way that I, you know, during this programme is we talk about the creation of a team charter, and that team charter may be aligned to your own organisation values and behaviours that you may already have in place, but to take some time. And I think if I go back to was it Broderick, I think, who said in the chat that they'd spent the first 6 months, can't see if I can go back, yeah, to think about the team journey and where you wanted to be and how you wanted to work together, so that you were focused on those value-added tasks. So that team journey is what is our team journey, and how do we get that out onto perhaps a piece of paper in everyone sort of signing up to it, and a great way to do that is this thing about creating a team charter. It's about agreeing those things, what's working well for us, what's not working well, how do we want to be with one another that aligns to your organization's values and behaviors, but also with your own as well. So think about, do we need to create a team charter or an agreement that we all sign up to? So has anybody got a team charter already in their teams, whether it's written or in any format whatsoever? It'd be nice to see or hear from you. No, but going to consider it. Thanks, Catherine. It could be really useful. Anybody else? Okay. So again, on the fuller session, we would explore this in a lot more detail. So what does a team charter look like? How do I go about creating one? So just as a sort of, Broderick saying, only type in the chat because my mic doesn't work. So apologies, that's okay, Broderick, thank you. You've put some great comments into the chat as well. I appreciate it. We had a big meeting saying, what do you want? What image do we want to portray? When we created a sentence that goes at the start of all of our training session that talks about our mission. And again, it really helps with the focus, and that's perfect. Just excuse me for a moment while I pop my blinds down. The sun has come out in Glenparva. The sun is out. Yeah, and it really helps with our focus. Thank you, Broderick. That's fantastic. Okay, so how do we go about it? So Broderick's already alluded, we had a big meeting. So take some time with your teams, think about what a team charter might look like, and take those conversations around those trusting relationships, but also those conversations around what's in our circle of influence and what's in our circle of concern, and what do we need to let go of as a team in order for us to cohesively work together and stay well and productive as a remote team. So what would you have in this charter or this agreement, whatever you want to call it, is take those thoughts and those words and those phrases, and if they're negative ones, so it might be that we want to gossip less, let's turn them into a positive and reframe those and say, we work hard to build and maintain our relationships. Be creative with your charter. It can be a list, it can be a collage, it can be a spidergram, it can be a table, it can be whatever you choose it to be. And it's really good if you manage to do this, is to get everyone to physically sign it. Because again, there's something about my buy-in when I've actually put my signature to something. And when it's ready, don't forget about it. Use it to hold people to account with kindness and compassion, but also don't forget your organisation values and behaviours, and periodically review it as well and keep it up to date. And is it representative of who we are as a team today and in 6 months' time, etc. So moving on to the last one then is, how do we monitor performance? How do I know how we are being and doing? And we've talked a lot about this throughout the whole session. How am I attending to people's emotions and tasks as well to ensure that we're on the right track as a team, to ensure success of a team? So what do we measure? What are you measuring? What are the tangible things? And what are the non-tangible things that you can pop them into the chat? It will be good to see what people actually do measure in terms of performance, but also resilience and well-being of their teams. Meeting deadlines. So being very clear on deadlines, I think, is really important with a remote working team, that we set deadlines, and those deadlines are achievable, and when things are not achievable, that the dialogue remains open throughout, so that we can flex and change as is required. Checking in on how people are feeling, meeting our objectives. So again, at the beginning of the session, I alluded to the fact that, you know, hopefully your teams or your service has got a clear vision, a clear set of objectives that everyone is working towards. And if those fundamentals are not in place, maybe, you know, we need to consider a bit of a rewind and think, what is our purpose and our vision? What are the objectives? What are we trying to achieve? And actually sort of, you know, rewind and start from that point as well, to make sure that everyone's on board with everything. Yeah, and Fiona's saying we're healthy. We need to ask each other, are you okay? Absolutely. And saying no to things to support the team when needed, exactly as, yeah, Rebecca, that's a good one. Any other thoughts from people about what they're measuring? Okay, so I'm going to move on. Okay, so Broderick, thank you. People chatting is a bit of an indicator for my team, as you mentioned earlier. Yes, exactly. Notice when there's a concern and touch base with people when they go quiet for a few days, when they're not always, you know, in your line of sight as such. So next steps. I hope you've all enjoyed the session and you've taken away some pointers, not only from me, but from other people who've commented during the session, and also, you know, the tips and things in the chat as well. And just to say thank you very much. Hope you've enjoyed it. And as I said right at the beginning, a half-day version of this session, which allows you much more time to explore each section, is coming early 2022. Thank you very much, everybody. Take care and have a good day and enjoy the rest of the festival.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you.